Hello, guys and gals, and welcome! So today I wanted to do my top 16, that's right, 16, not top 10, not top 15, not top 20, top 16 unique items. Look, I couldn't choose, okay? There's a lot of good unique items. I even had to do a subcategory, and we're going to go over those first before we go over everything else. These are items that I felt, number one, were very good uniques, don't get me wrong, but they didn't deserve to be in a top spot because they're very specific to very specific builds. All right. The first one on that list, I'm going to go over them really quickly, is the Death's Web Wand. Although the Death's Web Wand is an amazing wand for necromancers and can be used by a rabies druid, maybe you can thwack somebody with a wand on your rabies druid, and there are some limited uses on a poison javelin Amazon if you want to like cast swap. For the most part, it is a rather very good item, but it is limited to a very specific class and a very specific build. Also, Griffin's Eye Diadem, very similarly, is also very limited to a very specific build. It is mainly used by lightning sorceresses and also can be used by lightning javazons, but for the most part has no real use among most other classes in the game because it's very specifically pointed at a lightning skill damage character, and there are very few other lightning skill damage characters that can utilize this helmet, including the Dream Paladin, who wears the Dream Helmet, which takes the place of the helmet slot that you could potentially put Griffin's Eye in. Another item that is very similar to this is the Titan's Revenge. Titan's Revenge isn't a very amazing javelin, so don't be too sad that it didn't make the top of this list, but it is a very good unique nonetheless. It is just extremely limited in its usefulness, specifically to Amazons and specifically to Spear and Javelin Amazons, and it has no other purpose other than Spear and Javelin Amazons. Similarly, the Herald of Zakarum shield is an amazing paladin shield, but again, it is strictly limited to paladins, and many people would argue that although Herald of Zakarum is an amazing shield, a lot of the times it ends up getting replaced by things like Exile, Phoenix, Spirit, and so forth and so on, specifically for other builds, and that Herald of Zakarum is definitely an amazing shield, and anytime you see one drop, you should totally pick it up. You should totally put it in your stash. But, you know, it's not a all-around item that deserves to be on the top list. Another such item is the Death's Fathom Dimensional Shard. Again, another item that is absolutely amazing, but really doesn't deserve to be on the top list, specifically because it is pretty much only used for one build. For the most part, and although it is amazing, it's only sorceress, and it's really only specific sorceresses and specific builds of sorceresses. And last on my list of kind of honorable mentions is the Tomb Reaver Cryptic Axe, which I do feel is an amazing item. However, it also lacks usability across the board. It's mainly used for things like a druid, shapeshifter druid, and I don't really see a lot of other people use this other than shapeshifter druid, although it does come in handy on some mercenaries if you'd like to use it on them, but there are definitely some better options for mercs. The only real reason to use the Tomb Reaver, honestly, on a mercenary over other choices is Magic Find, because it does have some pretty good Magic Find on it, and you can tie it together with some other Magic Find items for some pretty good bonuses. Now, without further ado, let's get into the top 16 uniques. And as you can already clearly see in my inventory, I have a large number of unique items, and we are going to go over them from the end of the ranking to the top. So starting with number 16 on the list is the Razor Tail Belt. The Razor Tail Belt made it to number 16 on the list because of its versatility. The main reason why the Razor Tail is so versatile is because it has the piercing attack effect. It also has a very nice plus 10 maximum damage, very nice amount of dexterity, and quite honestly, it's just a really nice belt all around for a lot of builds. Whether you are a throwing barbarian who is trying to get extra piercing for his throwing attacks, whether you are an Amazon who is using a bow who needs extra piercing for her attacks, or you're a Javazon who needs extra piercing for her attacks, or maybe you're an Enchantress who is trying to utilize something like a Demon Machine crossbow and you'd like extra piercing, again, for your attacks, or maybe you're a a Holy Shock, Holy Freeze, Holy Fire Paladin who's trying to have fun with a bow, and you want to utilize your elemental damage in a way that you might not otherwise be able to. Having the ability to add 33% piercing to your character, no matter what character that is absolutely amazing and very, very versatile. And that's the reason why it made it to number 16 on the list, just due to its extreme versatility in allowing any character in the game to have the amazing ability to pierce targets. And of course, recently we had an additional item added to this list, which is the Wisdom Rune Word, which has an additional 33% pierce on it. So now any character in the game can have 66% pierce if you tag Razortail along with the Wisdom Helmet, which is actually exceedingly amazing. Because if you are a character who is trying to use a bow that is not an Amazon, Pierce is definitely something that you want to add onto those characters. Moving on to number 15 on the list is the War Traveler boots. So the War Traveler boots are an amazing pair of boots that a lot of people actually underestimate for a couple reasons. Number one, the biggest and most amazing draw of War Travelers definitely is the 50% better chance of magic items, right? Everybody looks at the 50% better chance of magic items, but the effect that a lot of people don't see and don't understand is the 15 to 25 damage that's written on the War Traveler's boots. This 15 to 25 damage is actually min and max damage, and it actually provides a massive bump in physical damage to a large number of characters. These boots can actually provide anywhere up to like 5 to 600 extra damage on something like Vengeance. They work very good on bow Amazons and characters who have really high physical damage numbers, because the 15 to 25 extra damage is essentially being added to the base of the weapon, and it's multiplying out across all of your skills, which makes War Travelers a very interesting pair of boots, not only as Magic Find, but also as the ability to increase the damage of your character, especially on certain builds where increasing the damage of your character is extremely difficult. For instance, a Vengeance Paladin gets very little bonuses that will affect their damage, and one of the very few bonuses that affects the Vengeance Paladin is min and max damage. So War Travelers are one of the best pairs of boots that you can put on a Vengeance Paladin because of the massive bump in damage that you get from them. Moving on to number 14 on the list is a weapon that actually made it onto the list, and that is Reaper's Toll. So Reaper's Toll made it onto the list at position number 14 because of its extreme versatility in both mercenaries and players, and quite honestly, it's just an amazing item all around. Reaper's Toll, especially in its ethereal version, has some amazing effects on it. Whether it's the 33% chance to cast level 1 Decrepify, which will break physical immunity, will cause monsters to be much slower and easier to kill in general. The ignores target's defense, which makes it so that you don't miss any monsters that you're attacking as long as they're not bosses. And the 15% lifesteal, which is absolutely amazing to help keep your mercenary alive, combined with the 33% deadly strike, which allows your mercenary to hit for double damage. And then on top of that, it has negative requirements, which makes it even more powerful. And recently, since the Druid, the Shapeshifter Druid, and werewolf and bear forms have both been changed so that you can utilize weapons that don't have increased attack speed on them, the Reaper's Toll has actually become one of the best in slot items for Shapeshifter Druids now. So not only is it exceedingly useful on mercenaries, very good on a barbarian, a whirlwind barbarian, also extremely good on Shapeshifter Druids now, including bear and the other. It can actually be utilized by a large variety of characters, just simply to add the Decrepify into their attack. Now, because it is a two-handed weapon, it is a little bit limited in its usefulness, and it is a polearm, so unfortunately it can't be utilized by the Amazon. But you will see Reaper's Tolls put on mercenaries, on Paladin mercenaries, on Amazon mercenaries, on Shapeshifter Druid mercenaries, on all sorts of mercenaries across the board. In fact, even if you don't necessarily need the Decrepify, even if you're on a character who doesn't necessarily need a Reaper's Toll is still an excellent item to put on your mercenary, especially if you find an ethereal version. Moving on to number 13 on the list is an item that has probably one of the most versatile usefulnesses in the game. Yes, that's right, Ravenfrost. So the Ravenfrost is a ring, and a lot of amulets and rings made it onto this list, and the reason why they did, honestly, is because they're just very good items in general. You will often find that unique rings and unique amulets can be among the best items in the game, and since there are no, obviously, rune word rings and rune word amulets, there never has been anything to replace the best of the best amulets and rings. And Ravenfrost is definitely one of the best rings that you can put on. It does not have lifesteal, it does not have mana steal, but what it does have, it is very good. It has cannot be frozen, which is something that a lot of people will use Ravenfrost for, but even without the cannot be frozen, Ravenfrost boasts an amazing amount of attack rating, 250 attack rating, 20 dexterity, which is even more attack rating, and more block chance on your shield, with a decent amount of mana, 40 mana, and cold absorption, all of which make for a ring that can be useful on a large variety of characters. Even if you are a sorceress or a necromancer or any other character who doesn't even necessarily need the attack rating, the mana, the cold absorption, the cannot be frozen, and even the dexterity can come in handy on characters that don't necessarily attack anything with a melee or ranged weapon, which is why Ravenfrost made it up to number 13 on the list. Next on our list is an amulet that I think a lot of you will agree deserves a spot on the top unique item list, and that is Highlord's Wrath. So Highlord's Wrath made it up to number 12 on the list, and the reason why it made it up to number 12 on the list is because it does have an amazing versatility. Whether you are a paladin, a barbarian, a druid, an Amazon, even a necromancer, sorceress, or assassin, everybody has some kind of build which can utilize this to make it interesting. I made a Bowenmancer one day, which was all about attack speed and proccing bone spears, and I definitely did need attack speed and plus the skills, so Highlord's Wrath was a good choice. Paladins, druids, they do not have any kind of critical strike effect to double their damage, and Highlord's Wrath has a deadly strike modifier on it, which allows players to double their damage. It also includes +1 to skills and increased attack speed, and all of which combine together to make this a best-in-slot piece of equipment for a lot of characters. Whether you are a paladin, a barbarian, a Amazon, an assassin, a necromancer, a sorceress, it really doesn't matter, because if this is the amulet that you need to put on for your build, guess what? You're going to put it on. Now, I will admit that necromancers, sorceresses are less likely to put this on than other classes. However, you will also find builds that even incorporate Highlord's Wrath in them on those characters. That is why Highlord's Wrath made it up to number 12 on the list, and it is definitely an amazing amulet. Next on the list is number 11. And that is Arcaine's Valor. So Arcaine's Valor is an odd piece of equipment that a lot of people don't consider because they don't really think about non-rune word armors. When you think about a armor for your character, a lot of the times you consider Chains of Honor, you consider Enigma, you consider Skin of the Viper Magi, or so forth and so on. But one of the things that a lot of people miss out on is that the Arcaine's Valor armor is actually pretty much the only +2 skill armor in the game that allows you to have a socket. Skin of the Viper Magi is only +1. Kay Hagen's is only +1. Spirit Shroud is only +1. There are basically no +2 skill pieces of armor specifically like this that allow you to utilize a socket. This means that you can put things like a fire facet, lightning facet, ice facet, cold facet, I said ice cold, poison facet, and if you're trying to build something specifically that requires as many +2 skills as you can get with the addition of a facet, Arkane's Valor comes into play for classes like a Poison Javelin Amazon is a very good budget piece. You socket it, put 1 poison facet in there. You've got +2 to skills with 5% poison skill damage and -5% enemy poison. For like some niche build, like a paladin that's using a dragon shield that has hydras. The reason why +2 all skills is superior to +2 to a specific character is because +2 all skills will affect things like O skills. So for instance, something like CTA, the O skill Hydras, you can look at a bunch of different things in the game that have O skills on them. I actually just recently did a video on O skills, and the +2 all skills will definitely affect it. We also have vitality based on character level, and we have 30% faster recovery on this, which does make it a very excellent piece of equipment. Damage reduced by 15 on here also makes this a very good piece of equipment for the Immortal Sorceress. Because it has +2 to all skills with 30% faster recovery and a pretty decent amount of life, combined with the damage reduced by 15, this actually makes a very good choice for the Immortal Sorceress item. A lot of people look down on the Arkane's Valor Balrog scan, but it is definitely a very beautiful piece, both in its statistics and also when you wear it on your character, because it makes your character look really sexy. Moving on to number 10 on the list, we have the wonderful, beautiful Arachnid's Mesh. Arachnid's Mesh is a rather rare belt, but it is also a belt which comes in really handy on a large number of characters. Why does it come in handy on a large number of characters? Well, it's the +1 to skills. There are no other +1 to skill belts. Unlike rings where you have, like 2 options, or armors where you have a plethora of options, the Arachnid's Mesh belt is definitely one of those items that can be useful on just about any character in the game that needs +2 skills. But then they didn't stop there. They also gave it 20% faster cast rate, which means it is extremely good for caster type characters. They also gave it slows target by 10%, which is something that is extremely good for a melee or ranged character, which makes this kind of good for either one. And then they also gave it a very decent little increase to maximum mana by 5%, which can be helpful on just about any character that wears it. It is lacking some of the more amazing effects, like, for instance, damage reduced by on Verdungos and String of Ears, or things like piercing target on Razortail. But all in all, the Arachnid's Mesh definitely deserves the number 10 spot because it is an item that is useful to a large number of characters. Is it useful to everyone? No. But it is useful to a large, wide variety of builds in Diablo 2, and if you found one, you would certainly want to hang on to it. Moving on to number 9 on the list is a very sexy pair of gloves known as Dracul's Grasp. Dracul's Grasp makes it onto the list for 2 reasons, and they have to do with life steal and life draining away. Dracul's Grasp have the ability to, number 1, spawn level 10 life tap on striking, which make these very, very good gloves for a large variety of characters. And they also bypass the restrictions on lifesteal. So if you guys are unaware of this, and I feel like I need to say this when I'm talking about Dracul's Grasp, Dracul's Grasp is a pair of gloves that has a large amount of lifesteal on it. As you can see, 10% lifesteal. But that is not the magic. The magic is the life tap, which provides a restoration of life for any physical damage that you dish out from a melee or ranged attack. Spells do not count. What this means is that if you are attacking a monster who has a drain effectiveness of 0, the monster will still give you life because life tap makes it so. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what monsters have a drain effectiveness of 0? Well, the answer to that question is monsters like Uber Mephisto, skeletons. There are also a large variety of monsters that have relatively low drain effectiveness, not 0, but very low. And then on top of that, we also have skills that do not lifesteal. So Smite, for instance, is a skill that does not steal life. However, it will steal life when you are using Life Tap, which means that Dracul's Grasp comes in handy on a large variety of melee and ranged characters, whether you are a Barbarian, Amazon, Paladin, or even if you are something like a melee Necromancer or something, I don't know. There's a ton of different options for you with these gloves. Now, they are not necessarily the best in slot gloves because they can be replaced by other items such as Exile, or if you're an insanely rich person, Last Wish, and you don't necessarily always need this particular item to cast Life Tap for you, but they are certainly nice to have, and they do make things a lot easier. And you will definitely find that they are worth holding on to, especially for trade value, if you, even if you don't necessarily need them. Moving on to number 8 on the list is a pretty sexy suit of armor. That's right, you may have guessed it because it's obviously on my character, the Skin of the Viper Magi. The Skin of the Viper Magi is a pretty darn sexy armor set. I'm sure it has more than just a body piece. It's probably got little pauldrons and jank and got some little elbow pads and stuff. I'm sure there's more to them than just the graphic. But the Skin of the Viper Magi has +1 to skills, not +2, but +1, which is pretty decent, although it does have a pretty massive 30% faster cast rate, along with a very nice all resistance is 35 and a magic damage reduced by 13. The Skin of the Viper Magi makes it up to number 8 on the list just simply because of its massive appeal to just about any character in the game. Granted, the 30% faster cast is more specifically pointed at characters that are going to be casting spells, but +1 skills and 35 all res with magic damage reduced by 13 is hardly something that a lot of characters will say, oh no, surely I would hate that. No. That armor is far too blue for me. I need something a little bit more green or red. So the Skin of the Viper Magi makes it into the number 8 spot because of its extreme versatility among all classes. If you find the Skin of the Viper Magi as you're leveling up, you will certainly not turn it down. If somebody hands you one and you don't have anything better on, you're going to equip it. It is extremely handy as you are going into Nightmare difficulty, where resistances are definitely something you're worried about. And as you get into Hell, those 35 all resistances become even more useful. You can, of course, socket it. You can upgrade it. You can put an rune in it. There are tons of things you can do with it. And the ethereal version actually works pretty nicely on the Act 3 Mercenary that has definitely seen a lot more use since patch 2.4. Moving on to number 7 on the list is a very interesting helmet, Andariel's Visage. So Andariel's Visage makes it up to number 7 on the list because of its extreme versatility among players and mercenaries of all classes and types. Invariably, when I am building a character, say in a hero editor or anything else, I often lean toward Andariel's Visage, and there's reasons why. It's +2 to all skills. It's 20% increased attack speed. It has lifesteal. It has a massive 30 strength bonus, including a huge 70% poison resistance. And quite honestly, Andariel's Visage fits into so many builds, it's just silly. Not only can you put this on just about any mercenary and get decent effect out of it, even the Act 3 mercenary who doesn't attack with melee because it's +2 to all skills, it also works very well on paladins. It works very well on Amazons. It works very well on barbarians. If you have this sitting in your stash, there is more than a good chance that it's going to be better than whatever you have on. It, of course, can be socketed, and you can increase the attack speed even further with a 15% jewel from 20% to 35%. And you can add all sorts of other things in here, like in all resistances. You can counter the negative fire resistance. You can find this in its ethereal form, and in the ethereal form, it is one of the best mercenary helmets, like, known to man. And the 30 strength bonus that it has on it makes it absolutely excellent as a gap filler for a lot of characters to help you equip other pieces of equipment before you would otherwise be able to do so. In fact, you can usually use Andariel's Visage to equip your mercenary with something like an ethereal sacred armor, which is 222 strength requirement. And that's why Andariel's Visage has made it all the way up to number 7 on the list. Moving on to number 6 on the list, we have a very sexy pair of boots. And these boots are known as the Gore Riders. The Gore Riders are probably one of the best melee or ranged boots that you can find, like, bar none. The truth of the matter is that it's really, really freaking hard as a melee or ranged character to turn down 15% crushing blow, 15% deadly strike, 10% open wounds, and 30% faster run walk. Even though there are some better boots, like for instance Goblin Toes, that have more crushing blow, or things like War Travelers that have an increased min and max damage, when you take into account the fact that Gore Riders are just super freaking sexy and also have negative 25% requirements on them, which means you usually don't even need that much strength to put them on, they tend to be the best in slot for a lot of characters, including the assassin, the kick assassin, who would upgrade them into the Myrmidon Greaves and use them in her kicks. These pair of boots make it into so many builds and so many characters that it's really hard not to give them the number 6 spot. The only reason they didn't make it higher on this list is because there are items of even more versatility than the Gore Riders. However, if you ever find yourself a pair of Gore Riders, it's definitely worth hanging on to them. They are quite possibly, without a doubt, one of the most versatile and sought-after items in the game for any melee or ranged character, and even some spellcasters who may use them specifically for the ability to crushing blow, deadly strike, and open wounds, like an enchant sorceress, or perhaps even a a necromancer using a bow. Who freaking knows what's going on? But the truth of the matter is if you need crushing blow, deadly strike, and open wounds, there's very few other items in the game that give you as great as an effect as Gore Riders do. The only other one I can think of off the top of my head that has really nice of most of those is the G-Face. But G-Face is a set item. Doesn't belong on this list. Next on the list, number 5 is actually a tie between 2 items. That's right, the Bul-Kathos wedding band and the Stone of Jordan ring. These 2 rings are very similar in many regards, and it's very hard to rank one of these over the other, just simply because they are both extremely useful in their own specific ways. The Bul-Kathos wedding band is a +1 to all skill ring that has 5% lifesteal and a very nice life based on character level, whereas the Stone of Jordan ring is a +1 to all skills ring, which has very nice mana and increased maximum mana. In any situation where your character has to have plus to skills on his or her ring slots, the Stone of Jordan ring and the Bul-Kathos wedding band become choices for your character. And whether your character is more melee based and needs more lifesteal and life, or more mana based and needs more mana, these 2 choices are absolutely excellent choices for a lot of characters. I specifically have used Soja's and Bul-Kathos rings in quite a large number of builds, because in a lot of builds you have to have as many plus to skills as you possibly can to make them worthwhile. If you were to give up the ring slot to something else, you would not get plus to skills, and then you would actually have to have your plus to skills somewhere else. But the thing is that when you're going for maximum plus to skills, you already have all the plus to skills everywhere else that you possibly can. So the Soge and the Bul-Kathos Wedding Band are definitely very versatile items that are used across every single class and honestly just about every single build in the game. There are very few builds in the game that would not benefit from a Soge or a Bul-Kathos Wedding Band, and usually those are highly physical damage builds that are focusing more on things like maximum damage, life leech, mana leech, things that would otherwise increase their physical damage even further, like min damage and max damage, as well as the kind of more awkward abilities. And that's where Ravenfrost comes in, and you will find that a lot of characters will choose Ravenfrost over these rings because they have to have the cannot be frozen effect. However, this is also where other items come into play that also have cannot be frozen, like for instance the Death Sash, Trangul's Belt, and even Cham runes in a helmet or armor, so that you can utilize things like these rings instead. Moving on to the number 4 spot is a pair of gloves. That's right, number 4 is the Magefist Light Gauntlets. The Magefist Light Gauntlets made it to number 4 on the list because, quite honestly, they are the best faster cast gloves that you can have in the game. If you are any kind of character who utilizes faster cast, you only have one of two options, either Magefist Light Gauntlets or Trangul's Gloves. And quite honestly, Magefists are the superior choice in most situations, which means that just about any character that utilizes any kind of casting, like an elemental druid, fire or ice, a casting sorceress, fire, lightning, or ice, a Hammerdin, a Fist of the Heavens paladin, whatever it may be, even if you are a Warcry barbarian. Faster cast is something that you are going to need, and faster cast gloves specifically are something that your characters are more often than not going to use. So Magefists tend to be one of the best in slot items in the game for a lot of characters. Also, not only does Magefist have faster cast, it's not the only reason it made it to number 4 on the list, it also has +1 to fire skills, which works very well with a large number of builds, and it has a pretty decent amount of regeneration of mana, which can help a lot of characters sustain their mana pools later on in the game. Although Trangul's Gloves has 30% cold resistance, I don't really feel like Trangs can outpace the very nice 35% or 25% regeneration of mana and the +1 to fire skills with the 20% faster cast, especially since the fire skills on a sorceress will give the sorceress even more regeneration by increasing her warmth spell. Just very, very nice gloves all around. They can be upgraded once or twice depending on your character's strength requirements, and you can get even more defense out of them in the long run. Now, Magefists are usually pretty rare early on in ladder, and they're actually very sought after in the very beginning of the ladder. Now, toward the end of the ladder, when everybody has gotten a pair of Trangs or Magefists, most people are not really searching for them that much anymore. But if you do find a pair of Magefists early on in a ladder season, I guess would be the right term, definitely hang on to them because they are certainly going to be worth trading, maybe for something else that you might need, even if you don't necessarily need the Magefists. Moving on to number 3 on the list is a crown, known as the Crown of Ages. The Crown of Ages is a particularly rare unique that is actually super duper sexy. It's customizable because it comes with 2 sockets, and it has a lot of very, very nice effects on it. It is +1 to all skills, including 30% faster hit recovery, which is absolutely amazing for a lot of characters. It also has 30 all resistances and 15% damage reduction, which means that you get a very sexy 15% reduction to all physical damage that comes into your character. With the combination of effects, even though no single effect on the helmet is that amazing, The fact of the matter is that the combination of effects is kind of insane. The Crown of Ages is often used in PvP with 2 burr runes in the helmet so that you can increase the damage reduction even further. You can also do things like add 215% IAS jewels, 2 runes to increase the resistances even more. In fact, the versatility of the Crown of Ages helmet is absolutely insane. You could even put a negative requirements jewel in there to lower the 174 strength requirement down to a more manageable level. It is usable on melee characters, ranged characters. It is actually very nice on mercenaries. And all in all, the Crown of Ages is one of those things that when you do find it, you're pretty excited about finding it, especially if you find it in good condition. The Crown of Ages, unfortunately, does have some pretty terrible variables, and you may find the Crown of Ages in a very poor condition. And it's very sad when you do find a poor Crown of Ages, but it's also very exciting when you find a very sexy one. Moving on to number 2 on the list. I'm not sure if you can guess which one it is now. Is the Harlequin Crest Shako. The Harlequin Crest Shako is probably one of the most versatile items in the game. Is it a best-in-slot item for every single character? No, not really. But the truth about the Harlequin Crest Shako is that you can literally slap it on just about any character and get good use out of it. Not only does it work very well on just about any character you put it on, you can also utilize it as a very nice magic find piece of equipment, because socketing it with a Ist rune or a perfect topaz will yield you a very nice 74 or 75% magic find. On a helmet with +2 skills, very nice amount of life and mana, and even a 10% damage reduced by. I often find myself in a situation where I don't utilize Harlequin Crest, despite the fact that it is a very amazing piece of equipment, and that is due to the fact that I don't usually play characters that use Harlequin Crest as their best in slot item. In fact, the majority of the time when I have my character fully geared out, Harlequin Crest Shako is very rarely ever the item that I choose as my end game piece of equipment. However, anytime I have a Harlequin Crest Shako on a character that is not fully geared up, that is not in his endgame best in slot piece of equipment, it is a very versatile and useful piece of gear. And obviously, if I'm magic finding, it probably is best in slot, because how can you beat 74% magic find with +2 to all skills? There's very few items in the game that are going to be that good in terms of magic find and usefulness. And that's one of the reasons why Harlequin Crest has made it to the number 2 spot on the list. Finishing it off with our number 1 item, that is Mara's Kaleidoscope. Now, you might be asking yourself, why did I choose Mara's Kaleidoscope as my number 1 item on the list? Especially when technically you could have a much better crafted amulet specifically for your class. Well, the answer is because it is not for any specific class. Although those crafted amulets for a very specific class may very well beat out Mara's Kaleidoscope, you will also know that one of the more popular items that people love to use is the CTA, which is the ability to cast the battle orders and the battle command on yourself, right? Well, O skills specifically are only affected by all skills, not individual class skills. So anytime that you make yourself one of those absolutely sexy amulets that has like +2 sorceress with massive amounts of strength and all resistances and faster cast and all that, you are losing +2 skills to your CTA or any other O skill that you may be utilizing at that particular time. And so Mara's is not only a very versatile amulet specifically for any character who wants to put it on, it is also the only amulet really that you are going to use in any kind of O skill build where you want as many skill points as you can to an O skill ability. For instance, if you use Enigma with teleport, Mara's will give +2 skills to teleport, but a specific class amulet will not. If you're using CTA, Mara's, again, will give +2 skills to the CTA, whereas your +2 Sorceress or +2 Paladin amulet will not. This means that Mara's Kaleidoscope is literally one of the best in slot items for a lot of builds that involve any kind of O skill. Like, say, for instance, if you are a Necromancer using full Trangs and you're trying to get the most out of your Meteor and Firewall and Fire Mastery and so forth and so on, again, Mara's becomes the best choice for that character. So as far as usefulness goes, Mara's is probably one of the most useful items in the game. You can literally put it on any character, and you probably won't have very many complaints. Not only that, but it is the best in slot item for any kind of O skill build, because you need +2 all skills, not +2 generic, or rather +2 specific skills. And that's why Mara's Kaleidoscope made it to the #1 spot on this list. I hope that you enjoyed my top 16 uniques, and I hope you're not disappointed that your favorite unique didn't make it onto the list. I did take quite some time deliberating and skimming and condensing down this list until I finally came to my my choices. Make sure you hit the like button if you enjoyed the video, and as always, thanks for watching, and keep watching.